Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Inktober. Last time we had the first 7 drawings, so that's the first week of Inktober, and we saw some pretty interesting stuff from there, so if you haven't seen that, check it out. I should hopefully be linking it in the iCard, and probably in the description, but who knows, I won't remember necessarily, I am forgetful. This week we have some very exciting stuff, so without further ado, let's get into the first time-lapse. First we have teeth, and it's gotta be a FNAF OC, because I have actually never drawn a FNAF OC. I've not really been one of the DeviantArt people, but I've seen them, I've come across them, and I like FNAF, so you know. I say that, like I've played the games. I've played the first game on my phone quite some time after it came out. That was in a video with someone who's definitely watching. We didn't end up actually making the video, I don't think. I wouldn't have been the one to edit it anyway, so that person, if you're brave enough, put in the comments whether that video actually exists somewhere in the world. Oh, it was atrocious. You wouldn't be able to tell it was me in it, by the way, because I was wearing an Iron Man mask to protect my identity. That really worked out well, didn't it? Here I'm using a soft brush from the Evident Concept Art Brush Pack, which is a brush pack which I found on the internet when I looked up Photoshop brushes. It's decent, it's got some pretty decent stuff in it, and I've just realised that actually this isn't from that. This is from a different brush pack called skin tone brushes, which is or skin brush pack for men or something. And so this is number 11. I use it quite a bit. It's more solid than some of the others. It does work really well for skin, as it happens, but I often use it just as a really nice textured brush. I used to use a brush that was actually from the Evident Concept Art Brush Pack. You know, it's not catchy, Evident, you might want to change that. But I used to use the fog brush from that, and actually, you can see that in some of the earlier time lapses. I used it in Fury of the Forest. I think the first time I used it was actually in the first time lapse. What was that? The skull one, anyway. You know what I'm talking about if you know the time lapses. But I stopped using that because actually it ends up doing some weird stuff. It is not as nice. It's decent for fog, probably. I've never actually used it for that purpose. What I'm doing here is I'm doing the shading before I did any colour. I think actually with this I planned to do it no colour originally, now I'm thinking about it. So sort of like how in FNAF VR, if you remember, or if you've seen FNAF VR, there's the nightmare mode, and if you do the nightmare mode for a few of them, there's like black and white modes which are really cool looking, and I think I originally thought that, and I thought, let me try colouring it in. The way I'm colouring behind this, by the way, despite it being on solid colour, is that I put the blending mode to hard light, which essentially means that towards sort of middling grey tones, it gets more and more transparent when something else is beneath it. So it means that if it's sort of grey but a little bit warmer like this is, it can end up having a grungy kind of look, which is perfect for what I'm doing here, because this is quite grungy. So you see even the blue and yellow wire on the faces, even that just has a sort of almost murky look. Here I switched it to soft light to see what that would be like. Didn't particularly like it. So just sort of mess around with gradient in the background to give it just some kind of substance back there. The lighting doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it works pretty well, I think. Next we have Throne. throw turned out nice, but it was actually a bit of a headache to do. My scratch disc got full, sort of like what happened at the end of last time. But in the meantime, the sketching process it was fairly stress-free and was nice. Sketched out this as a nice lady, and as you see here, the point is actually not throwing something, it's pottery throwing, which I used to not know what that was. I just remembered I used to not know what pottery throwing was, and I thought it was a really great game, but it's not. Which it should be. Let's make that a TV show. I do pottery. What, Pottery Throwdown? I think Pottery Showdown is a show. Anyway, this nice lady here, I like it. I don't usually draw people much, so this one turned out quite nice. This colouring process is not something I do very often, but I made every single layer a different colour, which is quite difficult. It takes a lot of time, but it allows me to then duplicate all of those layers, and then I can transparency lock them, and I can do set it to multiply and do some nice stuff with the mixer brush, which works out pretty well. Does some really nice soft shading. Here I'm adding some, I think I added a spin blow in the end to that. I tried a few things, but like I say, scratch discs were an issue, especially when it comes to blows. Up next we've got Hope. I love this drawing so much. This one, honestly, it couldn't have come out better. I started off here with using gradient, which was something that I wanted to experiment at some point anyway, and actually I might make it a video in and of itself. Sort of drawfy style, probably some kind of John Zati challenges I'll make it, and it'll be drawing from gradients, probably with someone, maybe like Kian or something, who knows. Sorry, Kian, to you watching this. There's a bit of pressure. I say pressure. 7 people who watched the last video. Oh no, the internet. Oh, the wrath is released upon you. I wonder if anyone, you may have noticed, I haven't actually brought up what I'm actually doing here. I wonder if anyone's actually noticed what I'm doing here, like, because I'm sure some people in the fan base of this may have recognized it already. This is, I think, the point where a lot of people will realize what this is. I probably would recognize, once I actually get some detail into these things. I'm not saying things to avoid giving it away, by the way. I'm saying things because I have no idea what purpose these serve. Yeah, this was a really fun one to do. It ended up being a lot more realism based than I intended. But it definitely, I'm so glad it did. Like, you can take a step back and look at it. Like, take a step back, look at it, especially, I mean, kind of blow your eyes, but like, even without that, even if it's just somewhat at a glance, I genuinely like, it genuinely looks so much like what it's, like the picture it's based off of. In fact, I sent this one to Kian, and sorry again, Kian, you're really the star of this episode. And he didn't mention it in the chat because he thought I'd just sent a screenshot from this thing, which is very flattering. Can we get a thanks, Kian, in the comments? We can't. No, there's no one really comments on the videos. Well, I get like one comment per video, and then I'm like, oh, thank you, but then I'm like too awkward to respond to it. So if you've ever responded, like, said a comment that was nice on my video, I will have read it, and I will have liked it. I'm just I don't really know how to respond to it. Like, I don't know why. I just don't. Using a lot of the mixer brush with this, which is essentially a brush that emulates oil painting. So you can push and blend stuff around. I'm even using a brush specifically that tries to mimic oil painting. There I added a Gaussian blur to it, a really subtle one, but it just allows it to blend in together and definitely adds to the effect of this. This is really what sells it for me, what I'm doing here with the outer glows. It looks a little bit strange, but what I'm doing here is I'm adding chromatic aberration. And what that does, to explain chromatic aberration, is where you, in often old film, using analog cameras, what can happen is, especially with things far away, some of the colors can separate and you get some iconic oranges and reds and greens. It's often an effect used around the edges of your screen, often used in video games, especially indie horror video games. This, I think, is the point where most people will have realized what this is. More chromatic aberration, this time not using outer glow. I was originally going to, but this time I'm actually using 2 drop shadows, because drop shadows you can make them directional, so you can actually offset them better, and I really think that sells it really well. Adding a bit of Gaussian blur to it again, because it's just that nice fuzziness of the film. This one just... I can't stress how proud I am of this one. It's... I genuinely, I look at this one so much. I really like this one. Yeah. I have much else to say. For those who don't know, this is an image from Star Wars: A New Hope. It was a pretty iconic moment from it, but if you don't know Star Wars at all, you may not actually recognize it. Yeah, I'm so proud of this. This is one of my favorites of the whole month. Definitely one of my favorites of this video. So happy with this. What is that sound? That sound looking. Could that be the sound of a leg scraping along the ground? Behind a creature perhaps not of this world, not of this life. What is that accent that Sean is trying to do? Is it Russian? Is it French? Perhaps a little German? No one's sure. How long will he keep it up? The whole drawing? Maybe. Oh, what is that now? No, wait. Is that the sound of a xylophone? A glockenspiel? Oh no. Very spooky now. Good lord, this accent is abysmal. Yes, so this drawing, there's absolutely nothing to say. None of the techniques I'm using are particularly new. Well, look, mixer brush. Wow, how crazy! I mean, it doesn't look particularly nice. It doesn't sort of fits the prompt that way. Well, look, graveyard, extra spooky. I sure do hope he doesn't get any fog in later. That would be extra spooky. I thought I was about to do that now, but actually I think that's like the last thing I do. Oh no, look, oh, missed, again, from the event pack. I need to learn the name of that if I'm going to bring it up. And here, and here's the blur. There you go. Perfect, done in one take. Up next we've got Slippery, and I came up with this one fairly quickly. I knew what I wanted to do for this one, and it came out pretty much how I envisaged it. That being said, actually most of this one is improvised, as you'll kind of see later on. Just getting in sort of basic outline. It's useful to color code your your outlines if you're dealing with multiple stuff, because it can get quite confusing. I also recommend coloring your layers sometimes, or like putting color labels on your layers. I haven't this time, but I did for... Actually, I do it for a later one at the very least. I think I might have also done it on Throw. Here we've got a screenshot which I actually took in Minecraft. I find that it's easier a lot of the time to create my own assets rather than try to find them, because I know pretty much what I want, and if I don't know what I want, I can't expect someone else to find that for me, or someone else to have created that for me, and it can be a really difficult time. So I find it helpful sometimes just to make it myself, and I find that easier in a way, even though it's actually would seem like more work on my part, but it's actually quicker. It sometimes makes me actually just want to learn loads and loads and loads of skills. Like, I'd actually really like to be able to have musical talent so that I wouldn't have to necessarily find music. I could just create my own synthetically. So that might be something that I work on in the future, but who knows. Yeah, I'm just improvising some lighting stuff. I'm using overlay, so I'm actually drawing in white, and because it's set on overlay, it's just turning sort of greenish because of what the background looks like. If you do want to know about blending layers, a tool that's really helpful actually is the GIMP documentation. So GIMP is a Photoshop equivalent that a lot of people use, but it's free. And so I recommend you check that out, because that has some really good notation of how the blending layers work. So if you just look up blending layers GIMP, I'm pretty sure, or blending modes GIMP, I'm sure that'll come up. I forget the search term I used. Like I say, I'm improvising a lot of this, and so yeah, I think I set my brush to multiply, but I didn't set the layer to multiply, which is something that a feature that I sometimes use. I generally set the layer to multiply, but the brush can work just as well. Got this, I think it was a default grass brush that I used over the top of my lighting, which actually created quite a nice little subtle effect. Like, sort of, it does look quite side-lit. Something I try in this, which I'll be doing in a sec here, is I try to do some light reflection and refraction. Here we go. And reference images for this were difficult, and I want to get better at this, because this is something that's limiting me in my realism abilities as well, is getting some nice reflections and refractions that make sense through translucent objects. So I do want to be able to get better at that. So that's something that I'm currently working on. It works decently well in this for something that I'm not used to, but it's sort of thing that works well if you look out for it. Here, man, just a bit of a blur in the background, which I find often just makes things look a lot nicer. It just adds a bit of depth. Well, it's literally depth of field. Yeah, there you go. Oh god, where am I? Wait a minute, this isn't Photoshop. No way, it can't be. It's Blender. So I did this one in Blender. It went fairly well. I have, at this point, I had Blender for 3 days. Yeah, this was day 3 of me using Blender, and I have to say, it went pretty well for something that I'm really not used to at all. I never thought I'd ever be able to do 3D modeling, actually. I thought the only 3D modeling I could possibly do was those sort of VR things, like I think Oculus Medium is something that Adobe bought or something, I don't know. But no, this was actually, Blender surprisingly is quite intuitive. I'm doing it awfully here, don't get me wrong, like this is atrocious. I had by this point learned 2 to 5 tools that were going to be remotely helpful to me. I learned how to move stuff, extrude stuff, which is basically that thing where I seemed to select a face and then I pulled it up and stretched it out and duplicated it. It's pretty much how I'm making all of these new shapes, is by extruding it. And then I also knew how to bevel. God, look at this. What am I doing? Oh, I'm moving each one individually. Oh, as I did not know how to flatten it. I still don't. But I wouldn't approach it like this. I wouldn't go up. Oh well. I just. Oh no. Oh. Oh, and I don't even use the mesh viewer for this, which is way better for this sort of thing. Actually, for this, you maybe have to tell in the background, I'm playing Pachelbel's Canon in D, or D major, and I was originally going to make a parody of it that that was all about me trying to use Blender. So for this part here, I was going to say, what's a subdivision? Wait, is that an icosahedron? Which is a rhyme that I still plan to use at some point. I'd worked out slicing apparently by this point, or something. I don't know all the terms particularly well. I used Blender a couple of times in this, in the process of Inktober, and then I discovered that it takes a very, very long time. This one took long enough. This one took, like, the whole drawing took about 5 hours. It was 5+ hours, I think. It was a very long time. But there was another one that you'll see next time, actually. A little teaser for that, which took even longer. This part wasn't bad, actually, where I extruded it inwardly and then I extruded out the fingers. It's very chunky. It's like the point wasn't trying to make something that would look good on its own, which is good because I was rendering in Eevee, which is not a good renderer. You're better off rendering in Cycles. It's just that Cycles takes a lot more power to do, but it does look a lot nicer because it uses something called ray tracing, which is not worth explaining in this video. But Eevee is much simpler, which is nicer to your computer, but it doesn't end up looking as nice. So, you know, everything is going to be like really chunky shapes. And originally I was planning on just sort of interpreting it and using it as a rough sketch, or, you know, rough base for then a drawing in Photoshop, which is kind of what I do, but I go very much solidly based on this. This is actually why I'm separating out the colours here, not particularly because those are the colours I plan to use, just because I wanted to make sure I could see what it was. Though I did plan to try and add maybe some kind of material to it, I couldn't work out how to do that. I might be able to do that now, but I'm honestly, I couldn't be completely confident with you. I finally worked out the camera, how to get it to appear, actually get the guy to appear on the camera, because I couldn't before. You may have seen that. We tried to get the camera to work and it just not appearing. I still don't even know why that happened. I messed it up badly. Yay, here we got the actual drawing part. This part is going to be quite a lot faster, disproportionately so, because I actually wanted to make sure that I got the Blender stuff was sort of the part I wanted to focus on, because if you speed up 3D modeling too much, it can get really confusing, whereas you can kind of follow what I'm doing here. Each color is not how it's going to appear in the end. Each color is literally there just so that I can see which one I'm working on. And here, I use a clipping mask over it, and I can just color it in nicely and do some nice shading. It's all very simple, and it ends up looking very weird. It's very stylized in the end. I don't dislike it. And this is sort of the consensus that I've got from the few people that I've shown already. It's like, I don't dislike it. It's just, it's a very interesting effect that it ends up with. As you see, I went back to Blender. I rendered it out without the main person in it, which was interesting. It's not that interesting, but I overlaid it onto that so I could just easily get those nice shadows. In the background, I had something and I just used some liquify on that. I think I might have used a wave thing to make it look like it's hot. There you go. Thank you for watching this episode of Inktober. I was really happy with how this one turned out. Even though June's did end up looking a little bit strange, I was still really happy with it because it allowed me to get used to using Blender in that way, and especially considering it was day 3 of using Blender, I was pretty happy with it. Trust me when I say that is not the last you've seen of Blender. Next week we'll be starting off with another Blender drawing, this one almost entirely done within Blender. I'm really happy with how that one turned out. I think it's going to be very interesting to watch, because I tell you what, that was a long one. So look forward to next time. Goodbye, folks.